We're continuing passage 1, and now we're on to the 4th reading section in there. This is passage 1 and passage 2. Again, the most important thing to remember, our strategy for getting through passage 1 and passage 2 is reading for theme. You're going to notice most of the test questions are theme-based when you come to this one, passage 1 and passage 2. So we'll be reading for theme. We're still marking the text, especially when we find those clues that will help us understand what the narrators are telling us. Some major things to remember when we get to passage 1 and passage 2 is that the two authors will not agree. They will never agree. This dividing line can be a symbol for how much they don't agree. Passage 1 author won't agree with the theme of passage 2 author, and passage 2 author will not agree with the theme of passage 1 author. They might find a little middle ground occasionally, but all in all, the two are on a very definitive dividing line. Important part to read, helps us understand and gives us context for the entire text. So please don't ever skip the introductory excerpt right there. It gives you, again, an idea about where the two may have been published, or if these are speeches where the two are speaking. Helps you really to understand what the motivation of each of the passage 1 and passage 2 are. So don't ever skip this little part up here. If you'll notice, passage 1 tends to be a little bit longer than passage 2. That's the way it goes. But another thing I want you to notice is that although passage 2 is shorter, let's have a quick look at some of the questions. We have one from passage 1, second paragraph of passage 1, line 65. Oh, we're already on passage 2. Passage 2. Passage 2. Passage 2 has to be true for 2. Passage 2. Passage 2. Passage 2. Why is that? SAT knows that when you get to this 4th reading section, fatigue is starting to settle in. A lot of the students in the room that you're testing in have looked at the clock, maybe once, maybe 16 times by now. They are starting to feel tired and ready for the test, this reading section anyway, to be over. The important thing to know, as you will, is that it's equally as important to know passage 1 as it is for passage 2. We'll show you some shortcuts, and remember, although we're taking our time on this very first reading section, we will get to a quicker pace as we move through the rest of the tests in our SAT study guide. So we're going to take our time going through this, understanding the strategies, and above all, reading for theme. Make sure to have your pencil. We'll be marking the text. In fact, let's start that off here. I'm going to prepare and get myself ready to read for theme of passage 1 and to read for theme of passage 2. Let's start reading. After reading passage 1, I'm going to take a moment, really focus on those things where we picked up on the theme and jot down the theme that we believe that Beveridge is telling us, which all in all seems to be that when the United States goes in and takes over Hawaii and Puerto Rico, their laws will cover and provide justice, safety, a liberal government, order, equity, civilization, and I see order lots of times. So let's write that as our theme. U.S. government will provide order, equity. I'm just going to pick up some of these words from down here on the bottom that I underlined. Justice, safety. Let's see what there's anything else. And civilization to the people of Puerto Rico and Hawaii. So U.S. government will provide order, equity, justice, safety, and civilization to the people. So as I mentioned before, it's very safe to assume that Brian is not going to agree with Beveridge. In fact, Brian is most likely going to disagree to the point of saying that Beveridge is wrong. Let's see if he even makes reference to Beveridge. So let's read passage 2 again for the purpose of reading for theme. And as predicted, Brian came right out of the gate arguing against what Beveridge had said. I really like a lot of what he said there in the first paragraph for us to hold them. So again, Beveridge believes that our government will come in and provide a lot of what is lacking in the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii. And then Brian says we'd actually be holding them. We can't imitate those European empires. They will protest against us. They will resist. There was a lot of language: protest, resist. Our whole history has been encouragement. We would be going in and denying them a voice in their own government. We would be holding them in political bondage, which is exactly a difference between that's not liberty, that's slavery. We would be having force. God himself put it in the hearts of everybody to love liberty. And I really thought this was interesting. God himself never made a race of people so low on the scale of civilization or intelligence that it would welcome a foreign master. So all in all, our prediction was correct. Brian does not agree with Beveridge's stance on the U.S. foreign policy. So let's go ahead and put that into our theme. Forcing government. Forcing government on a state will cause resistance. Denying them a voice in their own government. Denying them a voice is political bondage. Slavery, force. So what I came up with is forcing government on a state will cause resistance, denying them a voice is political bondage and slavery. So again, Beveridge feeling U.S. government will provide order, equity, justice, safety, and civilization to the people. Brian's arguing that forcing a government on a state will cause resistance, denying them a voice is political bondage and slavery. So there we have it, our two themes. We're ready to tackle the questions. We're going to start exactly the way that we started before. With our elimination method. Elimination method, getting rid of the wrong answers. So in passage 1, Beveridge asserts that the resources and immensity of the United States constitute a safeguard against foreign invasion. No, that is absolutely not what he's saying. Replication of conditions in Europe. No, that was not mentioned in passage 1. It is a divine gift to the American people. Resources and immensity of the United States. He did mention that. Source of envy for people in other countries. I don't believe that he mentioned anything about they're envious of us. He did mention a lot about the divine gifts that was given to the United States. So we will choose C. In the second paragraph of passage 1, the commands given to Beveridge mainly serve to, again, what we want to try to do, although most people in your testing room will flip back and reread lines 24 to 37. Let's see if it's possible for us to kind of eliminate our way down before we flip back. And then if we do have to flip back for a quick reminder, at least we know exactly what we're looking for. So in the second passage of paragraph 1, the commands given to Beveridge mainly serve to remind the audience of its civic responsibilities. I don't remember Beveridge talking about civic responsibilities. He was really talking about the gifts that the United States had been given. So let's get rid of that one. Anticipate the benefits of a proposed policy. Might be a little bit of a stretch, but so I'm not going to get rid of that one. Emphasize the urgency of a national problem. No. Refute arguments that opponents have advanced. Beveridge not once even brought up anyone who was arguing against him, so we can get rid of that one. Anticipate the benefits. A most nearly means our favorite. as used in line 65, recalled most nearly means. Remember, we're going to completely cover that up, not fall in love with any of the answer choices that are given to us. Recalled, go back into line 65, look for the word recalled, get rid of it completely, so it's erased. Someone has said that a truth once spoken can never be. We want a very simple logical word to take its place. How about taken back? Someone has said that a truth once spoken can never be something simple and logical. And a synonym for taken back, subtracted. So we're going to go look for taken back or subtracted. Repeated, does that mean taken back or subtracted? No. B, retracted, does that mean taken back or subtracted? It does, so we're going to keep that one. Rejected, does that mean taken back or subtracted? No, we're going to get rid of that one. Remembered does not mean taken back or subtracted. See how nicely that works? Very simple, very logical, works every time. Reasonably inferred, this is a theme question. This is our first theme question from passage 2. So quickly, we're done with passage 1 questions. It can be reasonably inferred from passage 2 that Brian considers the preference for national sovereignty over foreign rule. National sovereignty over foreign rule. Remember, our theme is that it is instilled, it is within everyone that they want to rule themselves. They do not want a foreign ruler. So that was our theme. So we're going to match our theme to the possible answer choices. Reaction to the excess of imperial governments in the modern era. There was no reaction. Sign that the belief in human equality is widespread. I like that one a lot. Testament to the effects of the foreign policy of the United States. I can't keep that one. Or a manifestation of an innate drive in humans towards self-rule. These two are very close. Sign that the belief in human equality is widespread, or this innate drive in humans towards self-rule. Brian felt that it was so important for individuals to rule themselves that he brought up the fact that God has given us that want to do that. So D is the closest one to our theme. So D is the correct answer. We do have to look back. Unfortunately, we have to look back very quickly onto line for best evidence. But before we look back, I want to point out and remind you about our question order rule. Question 35 happened on line 65. And since question 35 happened on line 65 and we're on question 37, I can automatically get rid of this one. Most likely, I could get rid of D as well, but let's see how we do. Again, we're looking for evidence that supports this innate drive in humans to rule themselves. So let's start on line 65. It goes to influence. Line 65. It goes on, and no one can set a limit to its ever-widening influence. I like it, but it doesn't really tell us what that is. So I'm going to get rid of that one. Line 71 to 73. He never made a race of people so low on the scale of civilization or intelligence that it would welcome a foreign master. Again, remember, we're looking for evidence that people believe in ruling themselves. So I really, really like that one. I'm not going to get rid of that one. And then line 74 to 77, those, and then nation. Those who would have this nation enter upon a career of empire must consider not only the effect of imperialism on the Filipinos, they must also calculate the effects upon our own nation. That doesn't really mention anything about people wanting to rule themselves or this innate drive to rule themselves. So therefore, C is our best answer. We have another one. Oh, don't look at there. We can't have you falling in love. As used on line 76, calculate most nearly means. Let's go back to line 76 and come up with a simple logical word to take its place. There it is there. Those who would have this nation enter upon a career of empire must consider not only the effect of imperialism on the Filipinos, but they must also its effects on our own nation. I'm going to reuse this word. I'm going to say they must also consider. So those who would have this nation enter upon a career of empire must consider not only the effect of imperialism on the Filipinos, but they must also consider its effect upon our own nation. A simple logical word takes its place. It doesn't change the meaning of the sentence, so it works. Let's come up with a synonym for a word consider. And we're just going to go simple, logical. Think about. They must also think about. So consider and think about. Let's have a look. Covering up possible answer choices. In line 76, calculate most nearly means consider and think about. Evaluate, I think that means consider or think about, so let's keep that one. Design, that's not necessarily consider or think about, that's almost like planning, so I'm going to get rid of that one. Assume, that's not considering or thinking about, that's making an assumption. And multiply, that's not consider or think about. So evaluate is our answer. In developing their respective arguments, Beveridge, passage 1, and Bryan, passage 2, both express admiration for. The thing I really want to think about on this one is passage 2 has to be true for 2. We know 2 really well. We know 1 very well too. They both express admiration for. Founding and history of the United States. Yes, absolutely. They both do. I like that one a lot. The vibrancy and diversity of American culture. I don't remember either one of them bringing up anything having to do with diversity. And I'm really thinking about Bryan, not talking about diversity. So let's get rid of that one. Worldwide history of struggles for independence. Didn't speak about anything about worldwide. It did mention that our nation has a history of struggling for independence, but it wasn't a worldwide history, so we're going to get rid of that. Idealism that permeates many aspects of American society. Both express? No, one expresses, but not both. So the founding and the history of the United States. We're on to number 40 already. Which choice best describes a central difference between how Beveridge in passage 1 and Bryan passage 2 view the concept of liberty as it's realized in the United States? And this one, I just want to point out, I really like these ones. And I like these ones because you can pick your strength. If you feel like you know Beveridge in passage 1 and his theme solid, like 100%, then on these ones, you would just really look at the first half of it. Beveridge presents it as a direct inheritance of the European colonization. You would just look at the first half. If you, however, feel like you know Bryan and you just have bonded with Bryan's theme and understand that theme, then you would just look at the last half of it. You just would look for the one that's true for Bryan's theme. So just look at it that way. Just think about it as a half and half. When you practice this the first time, it takes a little bit of time. This is a true time saver when you get to the actual test. So let me show you how it's done. I believe that I'm going to stick with passage 2. I feel more confident with Bryan's theme. So Brian in passage 2 view the concept of liberty as it is realized in the United States as Brian presents it as a sharp break from earlier governments in Europe. That's not true. So I'm going to get rid of this one. Brian warns that its exemplary quality would be undermined by imperial expansion. I do like that one. I'm going to keep that one. Brian argues that it was present from the country's beginnings. That's not true. And Brian believes that it is unique to the United States and could not work elsewhere. And that's not true. So what we have to do is just double check. Beveridge considers, and again, we're looking the concept of liberty as realized in the United States. Beveridge considers it so exemplary as to justify the conquest of other regions, and we actually wrote that as our theme, that our government would work well. So B is a very solid answer. It can most reasonably be inferred from passage 2 that Brian would criticize the vision of American governments of island territories that Beveridge presents in passage 1 for B. So criticize the vision of American governments of island territories. Again, that was basically our theme, where he's saying criticize the vision of American governments. It would be, he'd be saying that Beveridge was unrealistic since most Americans would be unwilling to relocate to distant islands. Not true. Deceptive, since economic domination would be the true goal of American government. Not true. Didn't say anything about economic domination. Impractical, since the islanders would insist upon equal distribution of resources. Didn't say anything about distribution of resources, whether it would be equal or not equal, so we have to get rid of that one. It was not even mentioned in the passage. Naive, since the islanders would object to be governed by Americans. That is actually our theme that we wrote down for Beveridge. So absolutely, 100% it's D.